Today I'm going to show you the basics of drawing hands. Now, hands are very important when you draw, especially when you're drawing comics or any sequential art. Your character's hands will convey as much information about their emotional state as their face will generally. Even sometimes when a character keeps a straight face, there's still a way to betray the emotion that they're trying to hide with their face, with their poker face, through the hands. Hands are extremely important. Hands are how the character interacts with the world that's around him, and a lot of beginning artists shy away from drawing hands because hands are pretty complicated, let's face it. But beginning artists will tend to hide the hands in the character's pockets, or just out of the view of the panel, or just behind their backs and such. And while that'll work once in a while, you really can't get away from drawing hands eventually, because that is how your character interacts with the world. That is how you show intense emotion and all sorts of little subtle things too. Now let's start by opening up the GIMP here, and I'll just give you a little overview of what the hand looks like with the bone structure. Now basically the palm of the hand and just the whole part of the hand that is fleshed out goes over these four bones here called the metacarpus. Generally, the metacarpus is about as long, or does it start? Actually starts with the wrist here. Now from the wrist to the knuckles, it's about the same length as from the knuckles to the tip of the finger here, the middle finger. So you can start your hands pretty much by dividing them into two to get your initial proportion. Then you're going to notice there's a slight curve to the knuckles and the fingers, delimiting the length of the different fingers. Now, the thumb is probably, it's the one that's way out there, different than the other ones. It's just kind of aligns to half of the first piece of bone in the finger right here. Let's start to draw a hand from nothing, from scratch, and I'll show you. If we say that the hand is going to go into this space here, we can cut it in half and know that our knuckles are going to end here. We know that the shape of our fingers is going to do a slight curve like this, with the middle finger being at the extreme. Now, if we draw the rest of the bulk of the hand like this, we know the thumb is going to start at the wrist here. Basically, the wrist bones form a sort of droplet shape, as you can see here. It's kind of like the end of a golf club or something. And the tip of the thumb, it'll be halfway through where the first knuckle is on the finger. So let's get drawing the fingers here. So there is a pretty complex way of showing you the proportions of the fingers, but we're just going to wing it here. And just keep in mind that they get shorter and shorter as they get out to the tip. See, now the longest piece of bone in the hand, it'll be covered up until it reaches the knuckle. Then you have another hand here, and another bone, I'm sorry, that just keeping into the proportion of this one. This one is to this one what this piece of bone is to this one. So they're all proportionately. And in keeping with the Fibonacci sequence, which I won't go into here, but you can check that out. So I'm just quickly sketching the interior of the hand here. And that seems about right. All right. Let's flesh it out. Let's make it look realistic here. All right. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is how the hand works. is that you have muscles that go up to up the whole arm, in fact, and the tendons all pass through this little passage over here, which itself is covered with another tendon right here. So you won't see this through the skin, but you might see is the tendons that go from the knuckle to the wrist. Well, especially when your hands are flexed, you will see the tendons coming out. Now our hand here is flexed, so we'll just let them show a little bit. Let's get a smaller brush in here, just to give a hint of the tendons like this. Now, our thumb here, it's pretty easy to have the end piece. You want to keep it bigger than the tip of the fingers because the thumb is always more bulky. And you want to give it a curve here because there's a little bit of meat here, there's a little bit of muscle, and the tendons of the muscle will attach onto the bones over the knuckles here. So this will be the whole meaty part of the hand that will be away from us, and we won't see it, but we will see this part that comes out over from the hand region here. Alright, so if we draw the outline of the hand, we can curve out where there's the knuckles, where the knuckles meet, just ever so slightly. You might want to exaggerate it if your character is particularly skinny or old, then the knuckles will tend to be a lot more obvious. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So I'm just drawing the outline, making sure I have the meaty part of the underside of the finger, because this finger is going to tend to be rotated a little bit. If you just look at your hand laying on the table, you can see how the fingers will rest, and they won't be perfectly aligned with the hand. They'll tend to give way to the effects of gravity and the underlying surface. So there's a little bit of meat on the side of the hand here too. We want to give it that slight curve before it hits the wrist area. And there's a knuckle that attaches onto the wrist right here, or a joint I should say, from the thumb. And here is the tendon from the muscle that'll just make the skin protrude a little bit. Let's take the eraser and get rid of some of that excess sketch lines like this. Okay. Now the tendon will make the skin protrude a little bit. That doesn't mean you'll see the whole line through. Eventually the tendons get lost under the skin with the rest of the elements in the hand. So you usually see them protrude from the knuckle and maybe a little bit over here. Now you won't see the tendon over here that's underneath the skin, so I can just hide this and just keep a hint of the tendons so the mind understands the underlying shape. This is why it's important to learn the anatomy of a figure, of a human figure. When you draw it, it's you might not see most of the anatomy, but it's always under there somewhere, and it's always going to affect the shape. So the structure comes before the surface. You have to know what's underneath, what's holding it all up. So I got rid of most of the sketch lines here to get the basic shape of a hand. It's a bit of a scrawny hand, but still the proportions are all in there. Let's clean up the outside. Just give it a little bit more weight. It's a bit scrawny for my taste. There we go. Just make it a bit bigger. So I'm not making the fingers longer. The length and the proportions are good. I'm just making it a little beefier, a little bulkier. Trying to draw the hands of a character that's healthy. So it's not too skinny. It's not dying. All right. Now this is more like it. The little finger is a bit long because it's kind of bent here. Try to remove a bit of the. Let's make it a little bit shorter. Make sure the proportions are all right. Okay, something like this. Now we can start adding the other details. I like to include the fingernails here, and I always draw the fingernails with slight curves. You'll notice that, especially on something organic like a hand, even though nails look straight to us at a first glance, you'll notice that all the lines that comprise them are all organic. They're all a little bit curvy. And since I'm drawing a male character here, the nails won't go over the length of the thumb in this particular one. You can feel free to do it in your version to make the nails as short, as long as you please. You want to vary it as much as possible when you're building a story with different characters. Hands will say a lot about your character. Over jaw, just folds in the skin right over the knuckles. Like so. I just put 3. It's enough. If the hand was even smaller in the page, you might get away with just doing 1 line. If we'd be doing a zoom in on the hand where the hand would be a major part of our shot or our panel, then you might want to add even more lines. Try to get it looking more and more realistic, or photorealistic, if you will. Alright. Okay. Don't want the lines over here to stand out too much. Want to keep everything proportional so it looks like a unit. Here we go. Let's add a little bit of shadow, a little bit of lighting. Let's say our light source is coming from hold on here, get this darker, even darker more. We can try to get our light source from here, so that means that there'll be a shadow created over here. This is a bit too big. Reduce the opacity, reduce the size a little bit, and try to suggest Hand has volume over here. It's touching the table, but some areas are lifted over. So when it's where it's touching, the shadow is reduced to nothing, and where the part of the hand is hovering over the table, you can see more of a shadow building away from the light. Okay, so I'll just make the opacity lower again, and just show the curvature of the hand here. Make the knuckles and tendons stick out a bit more. And make sure that where the side of the finger that gets the light remains bright, and then we can throw a shadow on the other side here, just ever so slightly. Might want to increase it, lower the opacity just to put it over half the hand, just a hint at the curve. And that's pretty much the basics of the hand. I hope you guys learned something. And I hope this inspires you to keep on learning about the hand, to try to practice as much as you can. Try to reproduce the bones of the hand, the muscles of the hand, and then pictures. Take a look at a lot of pictures and try to reproduce them until you can create hands from scratch. And try different styles from realistic, complex to cartoony, and back again. And play around with it. That's the best way to learn. So till then, keep drawing. Keep practicing, and if you have anything you'd like me to cover, just leave a question or a comment in the comment section. Thank you.